is a city under the sun, you know.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm glad to be here and to engage in this good topic.
All right, thank you so much for creating time. Somebody's listening to you for the first time.
Yes.
And I would just want you to introduce yourself before we dive straight into the conversation.
So, Alex Owiti is a communication expert with 17 years of experience, having worked in various agencies within Africa. I started my career as a journalist, you know, like you know.
All right.
Back then, I was working for Kenya Times. People call it Gazeti ya Baba.
Yes.
That is actually where I started off.
All right.
And then grew over the ranks, you know, working for a tech publication called CIO East Africa.
Okay.
And then started my what I would call public relations journey from Gina Dean Corporate Communications on Vitanga Road. And Gina Dean is well known, you know, for being, you know, a renowned brand in terms of growing other brands as an agency.
Okay.
Having handled, you know, brands like Safaricom, you know, Telkom Kenya that is just next door.
All right.
And a lot of corporates that we were able to handle, and then moved to work for WPP Scan Group, which is a global agency.
Yes.
Under the business unit, which is Ogilvy Public Relations. And after that, I decided to start my own thing.
All right.
I decided to take the risk, like any other individual.
Yes.
And started Alexander PR, and now we are here. We've been around for the last 5 years, you know, handling different, you know, clients across the globe.
Okay.
So I've been around the corridors of practicing communications, and I'm glad to be here to share, you know, a bit of wisdom as regards communication for business.
All right.
Yes.
I think it's just important for somebody who doesn't understand what communication for business is, just to maybe what is it? So
you can call it communication for business. You can call it business communication.
Okay.
Which is today, when you think about, let's break it in silos. So you have business, which is about enterprising. You know?
Yes. Yeah.
You're selling a product or a service to businesses.
Yes.
And then you need to communicate to your stakeholders.
Yes.
One of the key stakeholders for a business is customers.
Yeah.
And that is very critical. But then you have your internal stakeholders who are your employees.
Yes.
So we say that business communication or communication for business is about sharing of information, of course, with your internal and external stakeholders.
Okay.
And so when you break it down from an internal stakeholders, of course, employees are critical.
Yes.
And your shareholders who are critical, investors who are in your business. And of course, when we look at external, we look at the media.
Yes.
We look at the government and the regulators. We look at you know, other critical stakeholders that, you know, that influence your business in one way or the other from an external perspective. Yes.
All right. Maybe while doing this communication, what are some of the forms of communication a business would consider?
Of course, the fundamental forms of communication have always existed. They have never changed.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, the ones that we know about is verbal.
Yeah.
Verbal communication, which of course goes around, you know, the face-to-face meetings, telephone calls, and of course video conferencing.
Yes.
And we also have the written communication, which of course emails, which are critical today. Today we are using different messaging platforms from digital communication.
Yes.
Which is a form on itself, and of course visual communication that we're seeing today when it comes to infographic charts or presentation, or even adverts for that matter.
Yes.
But what I wanted to talk about when it comes to forms of business communication is that we've seen a paradigm shift that has changed.
Yes.
Especially when you look at verbal communication. When we had the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, you realize we could not meet face to face.
Absolutely.
things changed.
Yeah.
We had to now institute, virtual systems that could enable us communicate and also have business continuity. So things like video conferencing actually came into play.
Yes.
And you realize that today we are talking about remote working.
Yeah.
People are working remotely. People don't need
working
to be
from home. Yeah.
From home. So it means that we've invested so much in terms of, trendy verbal communication systems that support business continuity when it comes to video conferencing facilities that we've seen. Zoom, whether it's Google Meet, nowadays we do that. And of course, digital communication platforms like WhatsApp, instant messaging, that every day are actually in use.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
So those forms of communication, they're in existence, but they've transformed us in how we communicate in our businesses.
Yes. All right. I think talking about all these forms of communication, I don't know what would inform now the type of communication a business would go for. Maybe what are some of the factors to consider before choosing either or one of them or two or three?
I think they are critical, all of them. In any form of business, whether you're doing a product or you're doing a service kind of business. What will, of course, nowadays inform, because of modern day business communication, is digital platforms. Yes. So, for instance, I'm selling a product. The first thing what I'll do is market that particular product on a social media platform, so that I can be able to reach my customers,
Yes.
And of course, we know that some of these social media platforms or digital platforms, if you like, have different algorithms and technologies that they're using to be able to reach your customer.
Yeah.
So today, for instance, you want to import an item, for instance. You have platforms that do e-commerce.
Yes.
The likes of Amazon and the rest. We have our Jumia locally here, and people are able to order for products. The first thing they do, they put those products on online platforms, because the first point of contact for a customer today is on an online platform.
Yes.
You don't need to go to a store first.
Yeah.
So first of all, I interact with your product or service.
So you can window shop from home.
Yes, you window shop from home, from the convenience of your hand. For instance, we are privileged as Africa to transition in terms of using mobile technology, for a lot of things, for especially e-commerce. So you realize that I think by 2025, if I'm not wrong, there's a report by PwC that talks about Africa going to have almost over 500 million mobile phones by then, smartphones.
Yes.
So you can imagine everybody has a smartphone today.
Yeah, sure.
At the end of the day. So you need to access your customers who are today using their mobile phones.
So convenience
is a critical thing. And therefore, when you're starting your business, the form of communication that you're going to use is what is going to help you reach your customers quickly, communicate to them very fast, and have a turnaround in terms of closing that business or a deal for that matter. Yes.
All right. I think you've talked about factors to inform the choice of communication for any business. Now, why is it important maybe for a business to consider having an effective communication model?
Of course, the most critical thing is number one is clarity. When why it is important for us to to have an effective business communication model. And clarity by this is how you communicate to your customer with conciseness, with facts, without ambiguity.
Yes.
Because a lot of people communicate, but they don't know how.
Okay.
And that is critical. How you message.
Yes.
And we're going to get into some of those when you're talking about the barriers.
Yes.
But then when you're communicating, the kind of language you're using. Remember, before you communicate, you have to map out your audience and understand who your audience are, especially when you're doing your business. So if my product or service is targeting individuals, let's say between 18 to 40, how do I communicate to them? Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of choice of language?
Yes.
what kind of language do I use to reach them? You know?
Yeah.
And this brings in, the issue about the Gen Zs today, the categorization of different age groups.
Yes.
Gen Z has become a very synonymous, terminology in our lips today.
Absolutely.
So the Gen Zs, we have the millennials themselves. We have Gen X and all that.
Yeah.
But the critical mass that today we are communicating to are the Gen Zs and the millennials.
Yes.
So how do they consume information? So these guys are always online.
Yeah.
They listen to radio like right now online.
Yes.
They don't need to tune in as some of us
traditional
grew up,
radio.
listening to traditional radio. Wake up and tune and look for the network.
Aerial all over.
All over.
Yes.
Today it's just at the palm of your hands. You have internet.
Yes.
Boom, you're online and you're listening to a great show like Hope FM right today.
Yes.
So it is very critical to communicate with clarity so that you can promote understanding and create that work environment that is critical for your business. Yes.
All right. You talked about a paradigm shift in forms of communication. You talked of the digital era.
Yes.
Maybe, there are some crises that come with the digital era.
Yes.
And would you want to talk a little bit about maybe crisis management and communication?
Yes. It's always a very interesting topic for me because one of the things I always say is that crisis communication is something that can be crisis communication and reputation management.
Yes,
is critical for a business.
Okay.
Your image as a business, you depend on your image as a business.
Yes.
Your brand as a business, your identity as a whole as a business is very critical. And so how you position your brand, out there, and that also forms part of communication. No wonder people will decide to go with a certain brand because of how it communicates to them.
Yes.
How it appeals to their social cultural norms, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So during a crisis, or before even a crisis, it's usually important to audit what I call vulnerabilities of a business.
Yes.
What I mean by vulnerabilities is that what are those loopholes that could affect your business? What are those things that could hit your brand?
The threats
that could hit your brand. Sometimes we take it for granted.
Okay.
We just want to do business and don't even audit some of those vulnerabilities until they hit us.
Yes.
And I always say that seal your roof on a sunny day. Do not wait for the rainy day.
Yeah.
Because when you wait for the rainy day and you have holes on your roof, you'll be rained on.
Yeah, sure.
And sometimes it will be flooded. And this is what happens to brands online.
Yes.
Because whenever there's a crisis online, the brand is flooded with all the hits.
And overwhelmed.
We know what KOT does online whenever somebody's not happy about a service.
Yeah.
And I want to mention that sometimes you might think that because it's an individual who doesn't have a huge following, so it might not impact you.
It will not go anywhere.
Let me tell you, a small hole on a ship sinks it.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we take advantage, we don't see that. So it is important to diagnose your vulnerabilities and preempt what could happen. No wonder why do people do those fire, how do you call them? The fire, I'm forgetting the name. The fire drills.
Yes.
Why do people do fire drills? Yeah, it's because we are trying to preempt what could happen wrong.
Absolutely.
So we have to prepare ourselves and do these fire drills, and that is also part of a business auditing its vulnerabilities. So you look at your customer care, for instance.
Yes.
What are some of those challenges that you're having in terms of communicating to your customers? Probably is the turnaround.
Yes.
Today, you realize businesses have introduced bots, WhatsApp bots, to respond.
Automated responses.
Yes, automated WhatsApp bots, so that they can respond to customer issues instantly.
Yeah.
Or the bot has been trained, and this is part of the trends that we're seeing in communication today when it comes to artificial intelligence and robotics.
Yes.
Because you are able to institute this kind of technologies in your business for efficiency purposes and feedback.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if you're a bank, it's able to give you information that you need as far as the challenge that you have
Yes.
With a particular service. And the customer care team can be able to take that feedback or that complaint and deal with it, instantly. So the turnaround is faster. Long time ago, when we had issues with a customer care,
Yes.
You'd probably write emails.
Yeah.
You can imagine they're dealing with thousands. If it's a big business,
There are many emails coming in.
many emails coming.
Yeah.
By the time they sort out the issues and get to understand what you're going through, it will have taken a day or two
Sure.
for them to sort you out.
Yeah.
But today, because of technological innovations, that has changed. The bots are able to help you.
Yes.
You're able to feed information, get what you need to be, what needs to be done.
Yes.
And your issue is resolved.
Yeah.
So, in a crisis situation, I think it is very important to also, listen.
Yes.
Put social media listening tools on your, for instance, social media platforms.
Yes.
To be able to get that feedback. And we always say that crisis happens when you sweep issues under the carpet. So you can see a client complaining about something small.
And you assume.
It. Before you know it, it could be in the morning.
Yeah.
But by the time it's midday,
It's escalated.
it has escalated and it's bushfire.
Yeah.
And you do not know how to deal with it. So issue management. Take every issue that is arising as far as your business is concerned.
Yes.
And deal with it. Apart from customer care, it could be a regulatory issue.
Yes. Yeah.
There could be licenses that you need to get that you've not gotten, and that's why we say in public relations that stakeholder relations is a very important thing. So a business and its stakeholders must maintain and enhance that relationship in a better way so that whenever there's a crisis, you're able to deal with it. And a brand that communicates well enjoys some sort of empathy when it suffers some crisis. And we've seen some of these big brands suffer that. And still people are working with them.
Yes.
Why? Because of the way they're communicating and the way they're engaging with the different stakeholders and the community especially. And so it is a very critical thing during a crisis or post-crisis, especially when you're recovering from that crisis.
Yes.
So how do you also communicate to your customers, to your stakeholders post the crisis so that your brand does not suffer, long-term injuries that sometimes might have a bottom line effect. So something might happen. Somebody has complained, or people are complaining about your service.
Yes.
And then you do not deal with the issue. 1 year later, you look at your bottom line, you look at your balance sheet, and you realize that your business has been taking a downhill.
That's the impact on sales.
Yes, and impact on sales. It's because of not, dealing with your reputational issues.
Yes.
Yes.
So for a business that is in crisis right now, maybe they had not known what exactly to do.
Yes.
For example, somebody is in a crisis right now because of maybe it's online,
Yes.
and there was it's a threat, yes.
Yes.
But now the problem was with the business.
Yes.
For example, maybe one of the employees left and
Yes.
they now complaining they never paid,
Yes,
know. How
yes.
can then a business deal with such?
I think what is more critical, and that's why I say that always seal your roof on a sunny day.
Okay.
Is that from an internal communication perspective, and business, now we're talking about business communication, but there is internal communication, which is a critical thing. So you, as a communication department, needs to work very closely with your HR department to sort of like deal with some of these, what I would call industrial issues, industrial relations, of course. And when people are being laid off, how do you lay off people? Yeah, for instance.
Yes.
There's some sort of empathy that is expected from a business. And this is part of that business communication where you set up channels and ways of communicating when you're laying people off. So it means that you have to give them ample notice, and tell them, because of this business, whether maybe they're laying off because the business is not doing well. As we know that right now the economy is not doing very well. A lot of businesses are suffering. And so a business may just decide to, have a downturn.
Yeah.
And so that process of communicating to employees must have some emotional intelligence to it. So communicate to them, inform them in good time, tell them how the layoff process is going to happen.
Okay.
Today we are having issues, mental health issues. Some staff, you might think you're laying off some staff, and the ones that are remaining might be depressed.
Yes.
So communication comes in again.
Okay.
How do you ensure that process is smooth, is humane, in that manner? And so by the time they're leaving, they're still your brand ambassadors. What we always say that the first brand ambassadors for a business are your employees.
Okay.
How you treat them will determine how your business is going to grow. They sort of like own the brand, they own the reputation of your business.
Yes.
So you must handle them with some sort of empathy and humaneness, so that even if they leave, they still have some affinity towards the brand. They're still happy that I worked there, even if things went down. They handled me well, and maybe one day when the business grows or it bounces back, they might come back. So communication is critical in such kind of ways, and sometimes businesses do not handle them appropriately. Okay. Unfortunately, it's just boom. We're laying off. Nobody informed you. Nobody prepared you psychologically.
Yes.
And so people are laid off. So it is critical to put those communication processes, in place before you do such.
All right.
And even if there is, for instance, delay in salaries, or people are not being paid, communicate. And that's why that creates some sort of like a positive, vibe, if I may put it.
Yes.
That we know that the business is struggling, but at the end of the day, we're going to get our pay.
Yes.
But if you do not communicate, it creates some, it will create the confusion. It will create conflict that you'll not be able to resolve. Because at the end of the day, when rumor mills start moving out, and it's for your brand.
Yes.
So if you're doing business and people think that you're not stable enough, they will not come back and do with you business.
Yes.
They will abandon you. They'll abandon the ship.
Yes.
But if you handle it properly, I think probably you might mitigate the issue of the issue of rumors, the issue of misinformation, the issue of disinformation.
Yes.
That currently is a critical thing. Yeah.
So in simple terms, what I'm trying to hear from you is that consistent and early communication is very important.
Yes.
So that we send out the right information at the right time.
Yes.
All right. This is to avoid speculations.
Yes.
Great. And there's somebody who could be asking, what are some of the barriers? Because I know as people communicate, people decode information differently.
True.
True. You can be communicating these, somebody gets the other.
Yes.
Something very opposite.
Yes.
Now, what are some of these barriers you're talking about?
So, because we're saying we're living in the digital era, communication today is very critical in terms of understanding your audience. If I might go back to the audience mapping.
Okay.
And so language becomes a critical tool of brand communication. Because we've had a generational change. For instance, today, even how you communicate to a Gen Z is not how you'll communicate to me, who is a millennial.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you must understand their lingo, their language, how they communicate to be able to effectively have them receive the information that you want to receive. Today we have different kind of slangs, for different cities.
Yes.
Yeah, like in Kenya.
Yeah.
The slang that is used in Nairobi, and apparently I'm not keeping up, I think because of my age. The slang that is being used in Nairobi and what is being used in Kisumu.
Yes, they're very different.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
What is being used in Eldoret, Mombasa is totally different because of this generation. So language barrier is a critical thing. And therefore we've also seen the evolution of media.
Yes.
In trying to adopt to these languages that are developing. And you see, when a society develops, it also develops with its language.
Yeah, sure.
Language becomes a very powerful tool. So you realize that today we have community radios. Why do we have community radios? Why do we have community TV stations?
Yes.
Yeah? It's because they want to appeal through their language, and be
yeah.
able to communicate to them effectively. And so as a business, and you can see today, a lot of advertisements,
yes,
they've changed.
Yeah.
They're using Sheng, for instance, or slang, if you like, to communicate to the Gen Zs and the millennials, you know, because that is what appeals to them. That is what is going to make someone feel like you are listening, or you're identifying with me.
Yeah.
Language gives identity. So a business also, when it personalizes itself, yeah, when it takes a human form, it creates its own identity.
Yes.
And I can tell you, brands have been able to evolve over the years, especially big brands. They started very traditional, but they've been able to evolve because of that generational change.
All right.
And so the language becomes a critical thing for you to change to.
All right. I think you can just hold it right there.
Yes.
Just take a very short commercial break, and then when we come back, we'll be talking about more of the barriers of communication. Stay with us. 0717400555. It is our call and WhatsApp line. 20933 on SMS, and of course you can engage with us across our digital platforms at Hope FM Live. At Favored Frank, let me know what you think. If you got any questions, share with us, and we'll be glad to have our expert in studio respond to them. Conversation, and we are live on our Facebook and YouTube platforms as well at Hope FM Live. So, Mr. Owiti, we are talking about the barriers to effective communication. You talked of language.
Yes.
What else maybe do you have as a barrier?
I think the other barrier that probably is also critical to note is cultural differences.
Okay.
And as a business, when you're communicating, your brand communicates, your product, your service communicates, and therefore it's always important to understand where the business environment you're operating in.
Okay.
For instance, because of this cultural diversity and differences, you realize certain communities would like to be communicated in a certain way.
Okay.
Of course, you can see the Indian community when they have their holidays. You can see how they communicate, how they carry out their businesses during that time, and so it is critical to be cognizant of those cultural differences. The Asian community as a whole, you can see there's a way they conduct themselves, there's a way when they carry out the events. You must understand the cultural dynamics, what they eat and they don't eat. When you're carrying out an event, probably you're carrying out an activation, and you've gone somewhere and you are targeting some of these communities. So it is very important for you to understand how those communities operate. There are issues to do with religion, which are critical. Christians operate in a different wavelength.
Yes.
Muslims, of course, and other denominations or religions for that matter. So cultural difference or barriers sometimes can be a hindrance to some businesses if they do not understand them.
Yes.
So they're not a barrier per se, but they can also become a riding tool for you if you understand them.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And the other bit, of course, is issues to do with perceptions for different types of businesses. For instance, you might want to do your business in a certain environment, and they do not consider your business as something that is appropriate for that environment.
Yes.
So those barriers that come with perception are critical for you to understand when you're setting up your business, how you're communicating. So it is important to actually understand them.
All right.
Yes. And then you have emotional barriers, of
Yes.
course, that of course comes with issues of mental health,
Mood swings.
mood swings. So you have to understand our ladies, how do you have to understand our men, how they operate, and all this kind of stuff that comes with I would call it the psychology of communication that you need to understand. Because, for instance, right now, I would say, is it the right mood for you, right? The way the mood of the country is right now. Is it the best time to launch a particular product or a service? You must also understand the mood of the country. Yeah. Right now we've just heard from the business news, tourism business is booming.
Yes.
So as a business, how do you take care of that mood? We're going to festivity season. How do you take care of that mood to be able to capitalize on it? But sometimes because of political issues that sometimes go on, they become a barrier and they affect our mood and how we look at certain businesses, and so it is very critical for us to look at those barriers. Yes.
In the times of conflict,
yes,
maybe a resolution of it all.
Yes.
Where does communication come in a business? Because I know sometimes we have conflicts.
Yes.
And when we have to have a resolution for that conflict,
yes,
how does it maybe relate with now communication?
The first thing I wanted to talk about that when it comes to conflict resolution and business communication,
yes,
it also depends on the communication policy.
Okay.
Or the policy of the company or the organization for that matter. There are organizations that have what we've heard about open door policy. So that means that information is flowing down up,
okay,
rather than up down. From organizational communication, there is that theory, in terms of how people communicate. So when you have an open door policy, it becomes very easy for organizations to resolve conflicts and even catch them in time. For instance, if there's an open door policy, it means that an employee, a sweeper, can talk to a CEO of a company,
okay,
and tell them there's this thing that I'm observing that is happening within the company, and I think probably you need to resolve it. And if there's an issue when it comes to conflict resolution, it means that there's openness, there's trust, there's honesty, some of these values that are critical when resolving a conflict. There's empathy, there's room to make mistakes. It is always that when people get into companies, we're expected to be perfect.
Yes,
we're expected to perform optimally. But then we do not give room for people to make mistakes. That means that there's no open door policy in terms of communication in that organization. So when it comes to resolving conflict, there'll be no empathy. There'll be no some humane way of dealing with that conflict. So it is actually communication. Business communication becomes very critical in that direction when you're dealing with conflict.
All right.
Yes.
And there's somebody who say that somebody would say that the way you talk to me,
yes,
I don't like it. You're my boss, yes,
yes,
but how you address me,
yes,
it's really tearing me down. And I don't know, how does communication and maybe employee engagement and morale come? How do they intersect?
So when you talk about interpersonal communication, it goes back to the forms of business communication that we're talking about.
Yes.
Verbal communication, for instance, that interpersonal communication is also comes around with issues to do with personalities, temperaments, and I think where a company has invested in a proper HR department or system is able to do an audit on how, for instance, what is the temperament that Frank has?
Yes.
What's the temperament for Alex? What is his personality as an individual? There are a lot of tests that people today do to be able to determine how people understand each other, so that when they are communicating, they are able to understand who they are, their biasness, their prejudices that they have. But then it helps in terms of shaping the company's communication.
Okay.
So that you communicate, through the values of the organization, respect, honesty, trust, and all that kind of stuff. So that when I'm addressing my CEO, there's a way I'm addressing him. When the CEO is addressing me, there's a way he's addressing me.
Okay.
And again, that goes back to the open door policy that I was talking about. If you have a closed door policy, then and other cultural and social barriers, you realize that it might impede how people communicate. And this happens especially for different companies. You realize if you work for an American company, there's a way they communicate. If you work for a British company, there's a way they communicate. And some of these are probably, colonial nuisances that I might talk about that, shape how people communicate. And we talk about how the global North affects how the global South communicates. That's countries, Europe and Africa and Asia, how they communicate. They affect how we communicate. Even the style of leadership also determines the style of communication.
Yeah.
So all these things are in play.
All right.
Yes.
I think, Alex, our time is pretty much well spent.
Yes.
And I would really want us to talk about, just briefly, real quick, about how then can one start, maybe a business out there, an organization can now start their journey to effective communication going forward.
I think the most critical thing is to, first of all, understand where you are in terms of your location, the business ecosystem, the environment, and all its nuisances and all its, cultural dynamics. When I want to start a business, I have to audit myself and say, okay, I want to introduce this service, but then who is my customer? Who is my target market?
Okay.
So how does my target market consume information? So how do I reach them? Though we went back and said, Gen Zs and millennials have a way of communicating. This is how they access information. They are online, they are on X, they are on Facebook, IG, TikTok. TikTok right now is a sensation. So how do I access them? Through those tools. So the most important thing at the beginning is to audit your target market, understand their way of life and how they operate, then now institute the form of communication that is critical for your business.
Okay.
And then I think that is the best place to start.
All right.
Yes.
Great.
And there are other innovative tools today, as we talked about, artificial intelligence and robotics. When do you institute those kind of technologies for communication purposes? So it is also important to understand the modern day communication technologies that are actually trendy and can help your business grow.
All right.
Yes.
Great. And we just have 1 minute to call it a wrap.
Yes.
And maybe just your closing remarks as you come to the end of the conversation.
Yeah, I just want to say that communication is a critical tool for your business. And therefore, it is important to invest in it. For you to get good return on investment, it's important to institute an effective business communication.
All right.
Policy or plan for that matter.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex Owiti, a PR and communication expert. Thank you for creating time. And I know there's a lot more we could talk about when it comes to communication. There are much we've left out. We have some questions right here. But I think what we do, we can plan for another session.
True.
If you'll be gracious enough to allow us to.
True.
So that we can have a conversation and even respond to these questions.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for joining us today, being the 24th of October. May God bless you so much. See you tomorrow, same time, same place, as we activate the weekend. Until then, bye-bye. My name is Favored Frank.
Hope FM. It's now 9 a.m.
Listen and live.